My son locked me in a room. He took my phone and ignored my pleas to call an ambulance, thinking he would get his inheritance faster. I am an old, sick father, and he is a greedy heir who only sees me as an obstacle. But 3 days later, when he entered the room, what he saw made him scream. Before continuing, please subscribe to William's Revenge Stories and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. The front door felt heavier than I remembered. 2 weeks in the hospital had weakened more than just my heart. My hands trembled as I turned the key. The familiar click should have brought me comfort. Instead, it echoed like a warning. Hey guys, I'm finally home. Matthew didn't even look up from his laptop. The living room armchair, my armchair, held him as if it were his own, which I guess he believed it was. Yeah, I see. It wasn't exactly the welcome I had imagined during those long nights listening to the beep and hum of machines. Valerie came out of the kitchen drying her hands on a dish towel with a smile as bland as hospital coffee. Arthur, you look better. The pause said everything her words didn't. I put down my suitcase and my hospital discharge papers, scanning the room that had been mine for 37 years. The family photos on the fireplace mantel were gone. The bookshelf held different books, newer ones, arranged by color instead of by feeling. Even the old lamp my Elizabeth had bought at that flea market was gone. Where are my things? We were just cleaning, Arthur. It was getting cluttered, Valerie said, using that rehearsed tone she used to deflect uncomfortable questions. Clutter? The word tasted bitter. Those were my memories. Matthew finally looked up from the screen. Dad, we need to talk about the future of this house. The future? As if I wasn't part of it. As if the surgery had been my funeral instead of my second chance. I walked to the garage. The surgical scar pulled tight against the bandages. The familiar pain in my chest wasn't from the operation this time. It was from seeing my life packed into cardboard boxes. Tools I had used for 40 years. Photo albums, Elizabeth's recipe cards, all labeled in Valerie's neat handwriting. Arthur's things. Storage. Storage. As if I were already dead. Why is my stuff in boxes? Matthew appeared in the garage doorway, blocking my way back into the house. We thought you might be more comfortable with a different layout. A different layout? My voice cracked like old leather. This is my house, son. Actually, Dad, we've been thinking about that. He crossed his arms. A gesture that made him look like a stranger with my son's face. You're not getting any younger. The stairs are dangerous for someone in your condition. The condition he had never once asked about during my stay. Not one visit, not one call. The doctor cleared me for normal activities. The doctor doesn't live here. Matthew's tone had an edge I'd never heard before. Sharp, final, like a slamming door. We do. We, not you. Me and Valerie, just us. The couple who had taken over everything while I was fighting to stay alive. The evening shadows stretched across the garage floor, reaching for me like fingers. The house I had built with my own hands suddenly felt like a tomb. My son stood there looking at me with eyes that held no warmth, not recognizing the man who had taught him how to ride a bike, how to change the oil, how to be decent. I went up the stairs to my bedroom, each step a small victory over the pain in my chest. Behind me, I heard the soft murmur of conversation. Matthew and Valerie discussing something in voices too low to understand. Plotting something, probably plotting a future that didn't include their inconvenient old father. The bedroom looked the same, at least the same bed. The same view of the street where Henry waved to me from his porch every morning. The same family photos on the nightstand, though fewer than before. I sat down heavily on the mattress, the discharge papers crinkling in my lap. Tomorrow would be better. It had to be. Tonight was just the shock of returning home, the awkwardness of readjustment. Families needed time to heal, just like hearts. But as I listened to the sounds downstairs, the clinking of dishes, the low murmur of the TV, the comfortable routine of people who belonged in this place, I felt more alone than I had in that sterile hospital room. The house settled around me with its familiar creaks and sighs. Soon, Matthew's footsteps moved across the kitchen floor. Then they came up the stairs and passed my door without stopping. Not a good night. Not an "do you need anything?" Just the soft click of his bedroom door shutting me out. I lay in the darkness, one hand pressed against my chest, where the surgeon had cut me open and stitched me back together. The physical healing was almost complete, but something else had broken that I wasn't sure could ever be fixed. I woke up with the feeling that someone was standing on my chest. The digital clock read 7:30 a.m., but the quality of light filtering through the blinds felt wrong. Too bright, too harsh. My mouth was dry as sandpaper, and when I tried to sit up, the room tilted sideways. It wasn't the normal ache from sleeping in a weird position. It was the sharp, insistent pain Dr. Morgan had warned me about. If you experience chest pressure, shortness of breath, or sudden dizziness, do not wait. Call an ambulance immediately. I tried to reach for the glass of water on my nightstand, but my arm felt heavy as concrete. The simple act of lifting my head sent waves of nausea through me. Sweat beat on my forehead despite the morning chill. The phone. I had to reach the phone. It was on the dresser across the room, a distance that might as well have been miles. When I tried to stand, my legs gave out and I caught myself against the mattress, gasping. The surgical scar tightened, a reminder of how recent my chest operation had been, of how fragile the repairs truly were. Doctor said, "If it gets bad, ambulance." I whispered to the empty room, trying to remember the exact words, the precise symptoms that meant danger. This qualified. This definitely qualified. "Matthew." My voice came out as a croak. I tried again, louder. "Matthew, Matthew, help me." Silence. Then the distant sound of coffee brewing. The morning news murmuring from the kitchen TV. Normal sounds of a normal morning for people whose hearts weren't trying to kill them. I made it halfway to the dresser before my vision went gray at the edges. The pain in my chest intensified, radiating down my left arm like fire. I grabbed the doorframe, breathing in short, desperate gasps. "Matthew." I put everything I had into it this time, the shout tearing at my throat. Footsteps downstairs. "No, Jerry." Then his voice floating up from what sounded like the bottom of the stairs. "What is it, Dad? What is it?" Like I was calling about a leaky faucet or a burned-out light bulb. As if the desperation in my voice hadn't registered at all. "I feel sick. Really sick. Call an ambulance." Another pause. Longer this time. I leaned my back against the wall, sliding down into a sitting position on the floor, the phone still impossibly far away. My reflection in the dresser mirror showed a gray-faced old man with wild eyes, his pajamas soaked in sweat. Elizabeth would have already been dialing 911. Elizabeth would have been holding my hand, talking me through it, making sure I knew I wasn't alone. But Elizabeth was gone, and I was trapped upstairs with a son who couldn't be bothered to climb 14 steps to check on his father's medical emergency. The pain spread across my chest like spilled acid. I remembered the surgeon's words about stress on the heart, about the delicate nature of the repairs, about how fast things could go wrong in patients my age. The mortality statistics he had quoted as casually as if I were just a number in his success rate. "Matthew, please." I called out again, but my voice was weaker now. The strength was draining out of me with every labored breath. This time, I heard movement, the deliberate scrape of a chair being pushed back, the measured footsteps of someone in no rush at all. Relief washed over me, even as the pain intensified. He was coming. Finally, he was coming. The stairs creaked under his weight, each step slow and careful. Not the hurried ascent of someone responding to an emergency, but the pace of someone fulfilling an obligation. Still, he was coming. That's what mattered. I managed to pull myself upright against the wall, trying to look less helpless than I felt. The last thing I wanted was to appear weak. Even though weakness was exactly what this was, the fundamental fragility of a body that had already failed me once. That. His voice carried a note of mild concern, the way you'd ask about a neighbor's sick cat. "In here," I managed to say. "Hurry!" The bedroom door swung open, and Matthew filled the doorway, still in his pajamas, his hair messy from sleep. He looked at me, slumped against the wall. He observed the sweat and the paleness and the obvious distress, and his expression remained completely calm. "What's wrong?" As if it wasn't obvious, as if a man didn't call for an ambulance unless he was dying. "Call 911 quick." I feel terrible. Matthew walked into the room, his eyes scanning the scene with a strange detachment. He moved like someone assessing a situation rather than responding to an emergency. His gaze lingered on my phone, then it shifted to me and then back to the phone.
No, Dad.
I'm not calling. The words hit me like a bucket of cold water. What are you saying? I could die. He walked past me to the dresser. He picked up my phone and slipped it into his pocket. The movement was casual, practiced, as if he'd rehearsed it. Maybe that would be for the best. The room went silent, except for my own ragged breathing. I stared at my son, my only son, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, whose scraped knees I had bandaged, whose college I had paid for, and I saw a stranger wearing his face. Matthew. The pain in my chest flared, but it felt like more than just my heart now. Something fundamental had broken that had nothing to do with arteries or surgical repairs. Your old sick father. This house is worth $300,000. And Valerie and I have plans. He spoke in the same tone he might use to discuss the weather. Plans that don't include supporting an invalid. Invalid. The word cut deeper than any scalpel. I'm your father. My voice came out as a whisper. You're a burden. He moved toward the door with that same unhurried pace. And burdens have a way of resolving themselves. I tried to stand, to reach for him, to grab his shoulders and shake some humanity back into him, but my body betrayed me. My legs buckled. My arms were too weak to support my weight. I collapsed back against the wall, gasping. Matthew, please, I need help. He paused in the doorway, looking back with something that might have been pity, if there had been any warmth in it.
No, Dad.
You need to accept reality. The door closed. The lock clicked. Locked. He had locked me in. Matthew. I pounded on the door with what little strength I had left. Open the door. What are you doing? His footsteps receded down the hall, down the stairs, back to his normal morning routine, back to his coffee and his plans and his future that didn't include his inconvenient father. I slumped against the door, the pain in my chest now competing with a different kind of agony. The child I had raised, the son I had loved unconditionally, had just sentenced me to death. Not with violence or anger, but with cold calculation, with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in. No phone, no way out. And downstairs, the sounds of normal life continued. The TV, the coffee pot, the comfortable routine of people planning a future built on my grave. I pressed my ear to the door, listening for any sign of conscience, any hint that he might reconsider. Instead, I heard him talking to Valerie, his voice low and satisfied, discussing something that made her laugh. A bright, carefree sound that chilled my blood. The surgical scar on my chest burned like a brand. All those machines, all that medicine, all that careful monitoring to keep me alive, just so I could die alone, locked in my own bedroom, abandoned by the people I had trusted most. But I wasn't dead yet. And despite the pain, despite the betrayal, despite everything my body was telling me about giving up, something stubborn and furious was waking up in the part of me that had survived 68 years, 2 wars, the death of my wife, and now this. If Matthew thought I would die quietly and conveniently, he didn't know his father as well as he thought. I had survived worse than this. I would survive him. The window looked out onto Henry's house. Henry, who had lived next door for 15 years, who waved every morning, who had asked about my recovery just last week. If I could just get his attention. I crawled toward the window. Every movement was a small victory against the pain that was trying to pull me under. The glass was cool against my palm as I leaned up to see the street below. Henry's morning paper was still in his driveway. Soon he would come out to get it, coffee mug in hand, ready to start another ordinary day in an ordinary neighborhood where sons didn't lock their fathers up to die. All I had to do was survive long enough to get his attention. All I had to do was refuse to make Matthew's plan easy. The pain was real, dangerous, potentially fatal, but so was my son's betrayal. And between the two, I knew which one I was going to fight harder. The silence, after his footsteps faded, felt like death itself. I leaned my back against the door, sliding down until I was crumpled on the floor like dirty laundry. The carpet beneath me, Elizabeth's carpet, The one she'd picked out during our 3rd year of marriage, felt rough against my palms. How did this happen? Where's the boy I raised? The question echoed in the emptiness of my skull, bouncing off memories that no longer made sense. This was the same son who had cried when he accidentally stepped on a spider at age 7. The same boy who had hugged me so tight after his first little league home run. I thought my ribs might crack. My chest felt like someone was tightening a vice around it. Each breath was a tiny victory against the pain radiating down my left arm. The doctor's words came back in fragments. Any sudden onset of symptoms, do not hesitate, could be fatal. Fatal. That was exactly what Matthew was counting on. My own son. Does he really want me to die? The words came out as a whisper, barely audible, even to myself. I remembered teaching him to ride his bike in the driveway right below this very window. He must have been 6, maybe 7, with that gap-toothed grin and the hair that stuck up no matter how hard his mother tried to tame it. When he finally managed those first wobbly yards on his own, he turned back to me with such pure joy. Did you see, Dad? Did you see me do it? I had been so proud, so incredibly proud of this boy who shared my stubborn chin and my wife's kind eyes. That boy was gone. In his place was a stranger wearing Matthew's face. A man who looked at his father and saw only an obstacle to financial freedom, a burden to be eliminated. Maybe I really did become a burden. The thought slithered in like poison, spreading through my consciousness with sickening efficiency. Had I been demanding, difficult? When I called from the hospital, asking when they might visit, did my voice carry that needy tone that makes people want to run? When I mentioned I was lonely, did it sound like manipulation? The pain in my chest intensified, and I could no longer tell where the physical ended and the emotional began. They had merged into one massive weight, pressing down on everything I thought I knew about love, family, the basic human decency that separated us from animals. Through the window, I could hear the distant sound of a lawn mower. Someone starting their Tuesday morning in an ordinary way. Life continuing as if the world hadn't just cracked open to reveal something rotten at its core. I forced myself to focus on breathing in, out, just like the physical therapist had taught me after the surgery, counting the rhythm to keep the panic at bay. But this wasn't surgical recovery. This was survival. The window caught the morning light, casting long rectangles on the floor. From here, I could see Henry's house, his tidy garden with its precise rows of vegetables. Henry, who had waved to me from his porch just last week, asking how I was feeling, if I needed anything from the store. Henry, who had no idea his neighbor was trapped in his own bedroom, left to die by his own blood. I pressed my palm flat on the floor and pushed, fighting the dizziness as I struggled to my knees. The window was maybe 12 feet away, but it might as well have been 12 miles. Still, it was movement. It was forward. It was the only direction left. Crawling to the window felt like crossing a desert. Each movement sent fresh waves of pain through my chest. But the alternative was to lie still and let Matthew's plan succeed. My surgical scar pulled tight against the bandages as I dragged myself across Elizabeth's carpet, using the legs of furniture for support. The window latch stuck, painted over years ago, and rarely opened. My hands trembled as I worked at it. Sweat beat on my forehead from the effort. When it finally gave way with a rusty squeal, the morning air hit my face like a blessing. Henry's garden stretched out below me, neat rows of tomatoes and peppers, catching the early sunlight. He was kneeling between the plants, wearing his old college t-shirt and canvas work gloves, completely absorbed and checking for pests. Henry, my voice came out as a croak. The 2 weeks of intubation had left my throat raw, and the panic wasn't helping. Henry, help me. He looked up, squinting against the sun. Arthur, what's going on? The relief of seeing his familiar face, of having another human being acknowledge my existence, nearly overwhelmed me. Call an ambulance right now. I feel terrible. Henry dropped his trowel and stood up immediately, brushing the dirt from his knees. What's wrong? Should I come up? No, I'm locked in. I can't reach my phone. The words tumbled out. I couldn't tell him about Matthew. I couldn't destroy what was left of my family's reputation in the neighborhood. But I could get help. I could survive this. Locked in? How are you locked in your own bedroom? The question hung in the air like an accusation. How could I explain that my son had imprisoned me? That the boy Henry had watched grow up, the one he'd congratulated on his wedding day, had turned into someone capable of elder abuse. The door jammed. I lied, hating myself for protecting Matthew even now. Please just call. I think it's my heart again. I'm calling right now. Hang on. Henry was already heading toward his house with that quick, efficient stride of a man used to handling emergencies. 15 years in the classroom had taught him to respond first and ask questions later. I clung to the windowsill, leaning out as far as my weakened body would allow. The morning air filled my lungs, cleaner than the stale atmosphere of my prison. Down below, Henry disappeared into his house, and I could see him through his kitchen window, phone pressed to his ear, gesturing wildly as he spoke to the 911 dispatcher. Help was on the way. After an hour of abandonment, of facing the possibility that I might die alone and forgotten, real help was finally coming. But even as the relief washed over me, a new fear took hold. What would happen when the paramedics arrived? Would Matthew let them in? Would he maintain the fiction that I was fine? Just a confused old man causing trouble? He was smooth, professional. Thanks for watching and subscribe.